In the middle of a bloody war, the betrayal of his trusted general and the black magic used by the enemies causes Prince Arslan to lose everything. Without his father or his army, the young prince helplessly wanders through his kingdom with just a few chosen allies, but after seeing the suffering of his people, he decides to save his country and rallies together the most deadly army to wage war against his enemies. Ever since he was young, he was ignored by his parents as he was a worthless insult who couldn't even use a sword properly, as opposed to his father, Andra, the warrior king of Pars, who was always battling enemies on the front line, while his MILF mother, Queen Tahami, looked over the capital. Instead of learning to be a good prince, the little degenerate would sneak outside to talk to enslaved prisoners and learn about the outside world. On one such trip, he hears a commotion and notices that a prisoner has taken a boy hostage. The prisoner knocks the guard out and tells Arslan to stay away, but he volunteers to become his hostage instead. Soon, the boy drags Arslan through the city and the flustered soldiers follow them. Arslan has the IQ of a toaster, so he obediently follows the kidnapper and even saves him from falling to death. After that, they reach the walls of the city, where the boy's shit talks the kingdom for allowing slave trade. He claims that the people of Lusitania follow the god named Lincoln, who declares that all men are equal, and it is their duty to fight these low IQ losers who don't believe in Lincoln and keep slaves. Arslan feels the hate in his words, realizing that this might lead to a deadly war, and while he is busy thinking about all this, the soldiers surround them, and the boy decides to jump over the wall along with Arslan. They fall into the river below, and just then, a general named Darian arrives there and takes aim at the Lusitanian boy who is escaping on a horse. Arslan yells at him to stop, making him miss. He angrily asks Arslan why he stopped him, but Arslan can't give him any reason. They start heading back, and Arslan's entitled ass can only think about the boy's words, wondering who will wipe his ass each morning if they stop keeping slaves. 3 years later, the Lusitania army attacks their kingdom, and since Arslan is already 14, he has to go to the battlefield to prove that he is a man, and a general named Carlin is by his side to guide him. Just then, Arslan's pet eagle comes to him, and he finds that the eagle's feathers are damp even though the weather is as dry as my DMs, so Carlin decides to scout the area ahead. As it turns out, the area ahead of them is covered with a thick, unnatural fog that severely hinders visibility, but Supreme General Varys tells the prince that it is not enough to save their enemies from a total ass-whooping. Just then, the soldier comes from the king's camp and informs Varys that his nephew General Darian has made King Andra angry by suggesting they retreat. In the king's camp, Darian tries convincing Andra that the Lusitania army has set up a trap for them, because they must know that they can't beat the army of Pars in a fair fight. He believes that if they march ahead into the fog, they will be falling right into the enemy's trap, but Andra says that he will cut off his own balls before he backs away from a fight. He punishes Darian by stripping him of his title as a general, and Arslan and Varys arrive there just then. Andra lets Darian stay in the army as a soldier when Varys apologizes on his behalf, and then tells Arslan that he isn't needed here. The upset Arslan leaves for his battalion immediately, and Darian complains that the king should be kinder to his only son. After thinking for a while, Varys asks him to swear loyalty to Arslan personally, because the young prince will need it in the future. Soon after that, the battle begins and Andra gives the command to charge ahead. The nervous Arslan also follows his lead and commands his men to charge, but the Parjan troops fall into a huge pit filled with inflammable oil. The enemy soldiers shoot fire arrows towards them, and the horrified Arslan watches his soldiers getting cooked. The remaining troops decide to change their direction, but they are in for another shock as Lusitania archers have already surrounded them. Seeing that they are being attacked from all sides, Arslan's loyal soldiers force him to run away to safety. Unfortunately, an enemy soldier soon catches up to him and throws him down. He attacks Arslan with a spear, but the prince manages to defend himself and then stabs the horse to bring the enemy to ground as well. The enemy soldier lunges to deal a final blow to him, but Arslan manages to put his sword through his heart. The enemy soldier dies, but now Arslan is devastated that he killed a man. He begins roaming the battlefield, injured and dazed, calling for help, when suddenly he hears Carlin calling him. He immediately replies, only to find the general leading a group of Lusitania's soldiers towards him. Arslan doesn't even have time to register that Carlin is a traitor, as he has to defend against his attacks. Arslan asks him why he is doing this, but the traitor just laughs and says that he has some personal reasons. Arslan is knocked down with no hope of surviving, but then suddenly, Darian arrives there riding his magnificent black horse and effortlessly defeats everyone in his way as he rushes to save the prince. With just one glance at the battlefield, Darian understands that Carlin betrayed them. He asks why someone of his caliber would do that, and Carlin tries to coax him to join their side. Darian suddenly attacks him and kills the Lusitania soldiers in his way before clashing swords with Carlin, who realizes that he is no match for the greatest warrior of Pars. Carlin retreats with that, and Darian decides to escort the prince to safety rather than chasing him. Meanwhile, Andra and Varys receive news that two of their generals have fallen while they cannot reach the rest. Varys realizes that they cannot win this war now, and he implores the king to order a retreat. Andra is firm about dying like a warrior, but Varus reminds him of the horrors that will occur if their capital and the queen fall into the hands of the enemy. Swallowing his pride, Andra declares a retreat and asks the horns to be sounded to alert the entire army about it. However, Carlin has planted more spies in the army, and they kill the horn bearers and begin yelling that the king has run away. This rumor spreads like wildfire and shatters the morale of the army and the remaining generals, but they still keep fighting to stop the enemy from advancing. Meanwhile, Andra and his company take rest at a spot they deem safe, when suddenly a flurry of arrows rains down on them, killing most of the soldiers and severely injuring both Andra and Varus. The arrows soon stop, and then Lord Silvermask, a guest general of the Lusitania army and the mastermind of this battle, comes ahead. Despite his injuries, Varus rushes ahead to defeat the enemy leader and secure a path for the king. The ordinary soldiers are no match for the old general, and he quickly slashes them all. However, when he leaps at Silvermask, the Lusitania general shatters his sword and then deals a fatal blow to him. Andra is stunned to see the most skilled warrior in his army die, and then Silvermask declares that he has been waiting for 16 years to get his revenge before he slashes him down. In the meantime, Darian leads the prince to safety. On the way, they find an injured Parjan soldier being carried away, so they rescue him and learn that 3 of the generals died, and then the king deserted the battlefield without giving the signal to retreat. Arslan is shocked to hear that his dad would run away from the battlefield and is worried about his safety. Darian assures him that Varus will keep him safe. Arslan wants to return to the capital and protect it, but Darian believes that they will be stopped by the Lusitania army, so he suggests that they go to his friend Narses for help. On the way, Darian explains that Narses was once a noble serving Pars, but then Andra banished him for certain reasons. Now he lives as a hermit who devotes his life to painting, but he's rather bad at it. They keep moving without rest till late at night, but as they get closer to Narses, a lookout shoots a warning arrow and tells them to return. In return, Darian loudly introduces himself, and the lookout immediately comes out to greet him and apologize for his rudeness. The boy Elam is a servant of Narses, who leads Darian and Arslan to the door of his master, who comes out holding his paintbrush to greet his guests. Darian introduces Narses to Arslan, and he welcomes both of them inside. Arslan loses a few points of his IQ on seeing the paintings Narses made, and Darian asks him to just close his eyes. Anyway, they sit down to eat dinner, and Darian introduces the topic of how Narses is a genius strategist who won a battle without any casualty. Arslan is curious, and Narses begins reciting the story of how, 5 years ago, the alliance of 3 kingdoms invaded Pars with an army of 500,000 soldiers. Narses went to see King Andra and asked for a chance so that he could defeat the enemy alliance without any casualties. Thinking that the eccentric Narses would fail, Andra gave him permission to go ahead, and he immediately freed over 2,000 prisoners of war from the 3 kingdoms. The angry soldiers attacked him, but he easily disarmed them and then told them to trust him because by nightfall, their enemies would be torn apart from within, and that would be their chance to attack. That was what happened, and at night, the Parjan cavalry routed out the enemies with ease. Arslan is curious about how he did it, and Narses explains that he just spread rumors through the freed prisoners that Pars was in league with their kingdom. This created distrust among the 3 kingdoms, and they began fighting among themselves. Coming to the current battle, after hearing the details from Darian, Narses believes that Lusitania has found a great strategist. He refuses to get involved with King Andra and Pars again and gets into a verbal spat with Darian. Arslan requests that he help them, and Narses reveals that his father hates him because he suggested abolishing slavery. Arslan is not fazed by this, and he says that his father hates him and Darian too, so they are better off sticking together. Narses agrees to let him stay here for the time being, even though he can't promise anything after that. The next day, some of Charlin's soldiers come to their place, and Narses immediately realizes that Darian took a route that could be easily tracked because he wanted to drag him into helping Arslan. Arslan and Darian hide in the attic as the soldiers enter the house and tell Narses that they serve the Supreme General Carlin. Narses asks them if Varus retired from his post, and the soldiers smirk, saying that he is dead and that his head is on display at the gates of the capital of Pars. Both Arslan and Darian are mortified and furious to hear this, and the soldiers nearly spot them. However, Narses distracts them and asks their reason for visiting him. The soldiers tell him that Charlin is curious about the 2 fugitives who were seen in this region, but more than that, he wants Narses to serve him. Narses decides to give his reply in the harshest words possible and calls Carlin a dog who betrayed his master. Carlin's soldiers rush at him in rage, but Narses swiftly deploys a trap that sends them falling into the water below. Darian and Arslan climb down, and while Darian immediately wants to kill the soldiers and Carlin, Arslan can't hold back his tears as he thinks about Varus' death. Narcissus quickly diffuses the mood by bringing up breakfast, but Arslan and Darian are both lost deep in thoughts. While Narcissus and Darian bicker as usual, Arslan suddenly asks the master strategist to lend him his strength. He offers to reward him handsomely for his service, but the reward is not gold or land. Instead, Arslan offers to make Narcissus the court painter when he drives off Lusitania and becomes the king of Pars. Narcissus is blown away by his offer, and he immediately agrees to serve him. Arslan says that they must leave for the capital immediately, and Narcissus agrees. Elam leaves to prepare the horses, but Narcissus tells him to go to one of his merchant friends so that he can stay safe from war. Elam refuses to leave his side, saying that Narcissus can't do a single chore himself, and even Darian agrees with him. To top it off, Arslan says that if they let Elam go, they won't get to eat delicious meals again. The three men immediately come to a consensus and allow Elam to join them on the risky journey. Soon, they get on horses that were left behind by Karlin's men and ride away. Soon after that, Karlin's men get out of the pit and make their way down the mountain, certain that the prince will be caught because their colleagues have already gained control of all the roads. However, Arslan and his company are hiding in a cave, and Elam informs them about what he heard from the escaping soldiers. Narcissus plays chess with the prince, who immediately wants to return to the capital, and tells him that hurrying things will only cost them. He says that the first step of any strategy is to make the opponent waste their resources, and he plans to do the very thing by making Karlin's men look around for them. On the other side, the Lusitania army surrounds the capital of Pars, leaving only death and destruction in their wake. The people of the capital are worried now, even though they still do not believe that their army would have lost the battle. The gates to the city are shut, and the two remaining generals and soldiers anxiously watch as the Lusitania army draws close. Suddenly, a wagon comes forward, with one of the Parsian generals named Shapur tied to it. The archpriest of the faith of Yarda, Bodin, introduces himself and declares that he will make this captive general an example of what will happen to the heathens of Pars who don't believe in their god. He relishes the thought of the torture he will put Shapur through, but the general taunts him and declares that even if they succeed in capturing the capital, they will fall because of their cruel practices and evil god. The furious Bodin smacks his face with his staff until it breaks, but Shapur has yet to break. He yells at his fellow Parsian soldiers to shoot him down now, because he would prefer dying at their hands rather than getting tortured by the Lusitania brutes. The Pars soldiers try to shoot him, but their arrows don't even reach him. However, a lone archer climbs on top of a tower and manages to shoot down Shapur, silencing Bodin and his men. Queen Tahami also witnessed everything, and she asks her servants to summon the archer to her because she wants to reward him. Soon, the Lusitania forces begin their attack on the city, and the Parsian soldiers fend them off with their bows and arrows. While the battle rages outside, Tahami meets the archer, who introduces himself as Give, a traveling musician. He claims to be talented in multiple art forms and weapons, and Tahami gives him an instrument to prove his skills as a musician. He dedicates a song to all the Parsian soldiers who are bravely repelling the enemies as they speak. The queen rewards him for his skills with the bow and the lute and welcomes him as a guest. Outside, the Lusitania army fails to penetrate the sturdy defense of the capital, so they switch to another strategy. They climb on tall towers and yell in unison, calling out to all the slaves and telling them to stand up against the oppression of the Pars. They declare that anyone who helps Lusitania in this war will be granted the protection of Yarda and will be accepted as a free citizen. Tempted by their words, a group of slaves rioted, setting the city on fire and attacking the soldiers. They set fire to a temple first and then charged towards the gate to let the enemies in. One of the remaining generals rushes there to control the situation and kills a bunch of slaves to stop them from opening the gate. However, this breeds further contempt, and many slave rebellions begin all over the capital city. The second general reports this to Queen Tahami and urges her to promise better treatment of slaves as well as monetary rewards after the war is over. She doesn't like the idea because it goes against the principles of their kingdom and only says that she will think about it. On the other hand, Give is enjoying his stay in the palace and he thinks he should leave before things get worse. The Prime Minister summons him to his room and asks him to help the kingdom by escorting the Queen out of the capital using a secret tunnel. So as the battle rages outside, Give leads a maid pretending to be the Queen through the secret tunnel. He knows that the woman is only a decoy and refuses to lead her outside. The woman suddenly attacks him with a dagger and then kicks him in the groin to run out, but unfortunately, she meets Silver Mask and Karlin there. They immediately figure out that she is not the Queen, and Silver Mask kills her immediately because he only has business with Tahami. However, as he is leaving, the ladies' man Give comes to stop him because he won't tolerate anyone killing beautiful women. He and Silver Mask immediately clash with each other, and Give manages to take him by surprise by throwing his torch in his face. Silver Mask is stunned by this, so Karlin immediately takes him and heads ahead towards the palace, leaving some soldiers to deal with Give. The musician is too skilled for them to handle, and he easily dispatches all the soldiers one by one. He then grabs whatever money the dead soldiers have on them and escapes before he is discovered by their reinforcements. Soon after that, the Lusitania soldiers infiltrate the palace and set it on fire. They free the prisoners and tell them to bring down their oppressors. The Parisian soldiers cannot deal with all of them, and the general, who comes to the rescue of the queen, also gets hunted down by Carlin and Silver Mask. With the Parisian forces distracted by the events at the palace, the slaves manage to open the gates. The Lusitania main force marches in and kills any remaining Parisian soldiers, successfully capturing the capital. Meanwhile, Arslan and his group are unaware of what has happened, but they have come to the conclusion that the Lusitania army will try to use the slaves to open the gates of the capital for them. Despite that, Narcissus believes that it is foolish to head toward the capital right now. He convinces Arslan and Darien to wait till the seizure of the capital is over, because after that, Carlin is sure to come after the prince, and that will be their chance to hunt him and get some information. Back in the capital, the obese king of Lusitania, Innocentus, arrives in the conquered palace to claim it as his own. In the meantime, Silver Mask and his men search for Tahami, and they eventually find her. She is brought before Innocentus and his court, and one general tells another that Tahami's beauty has led numerous men to their doom as they fought over her. Even Andra only got to marry her after killing his elder brother and the former king of Pars for her. However, they believe that their king will never fall for the charm of the heathen woman and severely punish her. They are all wrong because the fat king immediately falls for Tahami the moment he lays his eyes on her. His servants are at a loss now, so they run to Gis, his younger brother, who is the only one who can talk sense into Innocentus. Gis runs to Innocentus, who is touring the Parisian treasury. The Fatso tells him that he wants to make Tahami his queen, and he is not deterred by the fact that all the men who were interested in her lost their lives. He also declares that the entire treasury will be offered to god Yarda as an offering, so Baden will take charge of it. Everyone is dissatisfied with Innocentus, with Gis at the forefront, and Silver Mask visits him in his office later, telling him that he is the only one in Lusitania to become the king. On the other hand, the Lusitania soldiers are bossing around the merchants in the capital. Among them is the boy named Ishiol, who escaped the city with Arslan's help 3 years ago. He is looking for the people who were brought here along with him but can't find any information. Just then, he spots a soldier trying to force himself on a girl by dragging her into an alley. The boy runs to stop the soldier, but to his shock, the girl has killed him already. She immediately attacks Etoile, and he somehow pulls the hood and the wig along with it to reveal that the girl is actually Elam. Elam pushes Etoile to a settlement of slaves, who surround him and ask when they are going to be made free. Using this chance, Elam escapes and returns to their hideout, where he informs everyone about the situation. All the generals in the capital have been killed, but there is no news about the king's fate. Presently, Carlin is leading an army of 1,000 cavalrymen to hunt Arslan down so that he doesn't become a threat to them later. Arslan wonders how Carlin will even find them, and Narcissus believes that he will try to burn some village to force him out of hiding. Arslan is horrified by the thought, and he gives the command to follow Carlin's troops. While he is preparing the horses, Darien tells Narcissus that going after Carlin is not a safe idea. However, Narcissus says that this is a test for Arslan to prove his worthiness as a future ruler, and if he had decided not to help the village, he would have abandoned him. At night, Carlin and his men attack a village, falsely accusing them of sheltering Arslan. The villagers beg him to spare their lives as they say that they are innocent, but Carlin is here just to make an example of them, so he kills everyone in the village. The next day, Guy is just wandering around aimlessly, trying not to get involved with the Lusitania soldiers. However, as he sees a pretty woman heading towards the Lusitania soldiers, he decides to follow her so that he can save her from the Lusitania soldiers and rise her up. However, the woman turns out to be a highly skilled archer, who manages to hunt down half of the soldiers even before Guy reaches her. When he tries to act like she was lucky that he arrived in time to save her, she simply walks away without paying him any mind. Yves manages to get her attention by screaming at her and then introduces himself to her. The woman introduces herself as Farah, a priestess of god Mithra, who has come here as an emissary to the capital of Pars Kingdom. However, since the capital has already fallen, she wants to see Crown Prince Arslan before she returns. Farah asks Yves if he knows anything about the prince, and when he says that he has nothing to tell her, she leaves quietly. However, Yves follows her as he asks her why she is so desperate to meet the prince. Farah says that the temple she serves was built using a donation made in Arslan's name, and in return, the former head priest pledged to help him out in times of need. That is why the current head priest sent her here. But Farah believes that he also wanted to get rid of her because not only is she beautiful, but she is vastly more talented than anyone else at the temple. She declares that even if she cannot complete her mission to help the prince, she hates the Lusitania for forcing their beliefs on others and wants to drive them out of Pars. With that, she speeds ahead, but Give persistently follows her. At night, they spot the troops led by Carlin passing them by, and Farah decides to follow them, believing that she might find the prince through them. Meanwhile, Carlin's soldiers find a beaten-up man who acted as a porter for Arslan's party earlier but tried to steal from them and got thrashed. That is why he is here to snitch on them in exchange for a reward. However, the only reward the traitor gives him is death because he believes that the man was working for Narses. He decides to head in the opposite direction of what the man told them, because that is Narses' old territory, and they can gather many allies there. Carlin immediately leads his troops to the north through a narrow trail, but that is just as Narses wanted him to do. Suddenly, Narses is attacked by Farah, but he parries her attack. He asks her to introduce herself after he tells her that he serves Prince Arslan, and Farah immediately takes off her mask and apologizes for attacking him. She introduces herself and says that she is here to serve Arslan, and Narses accepts her without a doubt and even counts Give in with her. Soon it is time for Arslan to start Phase 2 of Narses' plan. He stands atop a cliff and announces his presence to Carlin. The traitor immediately sends his soldiers after him, and Arslan shoots them down with a bow while Elam uses a slingshot to back him up. While the enemy soldiers are distracted by Arslan, Narses sneaks behind and kills a few of them, and then Farah shoots them from the forest, throwing them in chaos. Give also joins them, and because of the hit-and-run strategy, Carlin's soldiers believe that they are surrounded by hundreds of enemies. As for the final part, Elam sends some stones rumbling down the mountain and declares that the greatest warrior, Darian, is approaching. Carlin's soldiers panic on hearing his name and run away hastily, leaving their general behind. The furious Carlin rushes towards Arslan, hoping to capture him before Darian arrives. Arslan shoots his arrows at him, but Carlin deflects them all, and soon his quiver is empty. Carlin stands face to face with him now, but just then Darian comes there and saves the prince. He fights with Carlin and outmaneuvers him at the edge of the cliff to land a hit that rattles him. Carlin trips because of that and gets impaled by his own spear. In the dying moments, he answers Darian's question and says that Andra is still alive, but he is no longer the king. He declares that the rightful heir will ascend to the throne soon, and both Darian and Narses are confused. Just then, Arslan arrives there only to witness Carlin dying. The prince is devastated, but Darian manages to distract him with the good news that his dad is still alive. After that, Farah and Give introduce themselves to Arslan. But before they can talk more, Narses suggests that they change locations before Carlin's soldiers return. However, Arslan tells him to wait and then asks Farah to offer funeral rites to Carlin and his fallen soldiers. Farah obeys and offers a prayer to the fallen soldiers as the sun rises. Meanwhile, Andra has been imprisoned deep under the Pars Palace. Silver Mask pays him a visit to ask him if he remembers him. Andra has no idea, so the man removes his mask and reveals that he is Hilms, the son of his elder brother. He reminds Andra of his cruelty on the day 16 years ago when he killed his brother for a woman. Hilms declares that now that he has returned, he will take the throne of Pars as his rightful heir. However, Andra only laughs like a madman on hearing this. Soon after that, Hilms returns to a room where a masked magician working for him informs him that Carlin is dead. The next day, Darian and Narses sneak into the capital to find out more about the king and the queen. At night, they run into a drunken soldier who used to serve Carlin, and he immediately realizes Darian. The soldiers run away in fear, and Narses decides to chase after him alone because he knows that it is a trap. The soldiers corner him, but he's far too skilled to be trapped by the likes of them. They interrogate the soldier who has no idea about where Andra is imprisoned. However, he can tell them that Tahami is soon going to marry King Innocentus of Lusitania. Shocked by this news, Darian and Narses decide to split up to gather more information about the queen's circumstances. Darian runs into Hilms, and they immediately attack each other. They are evenly matched, and after Darian introduces himself, Hilms laughs as he reveals that he killed his uncle Varys. Driven by rage, Darian attacks Hilms and slashes off his mask to reveal a nasty burn around his right eye. Hilms curses him and launches his attack again, but Narses arrives there just then and forces him to back up. Hilms launches an attack at both the intruders, and soon Lusitania's soldiers surround the area. Darian and Narses decide to retreat immediately. On the way back, Darian admits that Hilms was more skilled than him, and if Narses had not come on time, he would have been in danger. On the other hand, Arslan and the rest of the group are on the outskirts of the capital. As Elam goes to fetch water, Arslan rests in an abandoned building. He notices some Lusitania soldiers holding a girl hostage and demanding money from her father. Arslan wants to help them, but he can't reveal that he is the prince, so he takes a shovel he finds nearby to face them off. However, before any violence can take place, Ichiol comes there and sends the soldiers away since he is a captain in the army. He also tells Arslan to head back to where he came from, and only then do they recognize each other. They go to the abandoned building to catch up, and Ichiol curses Andra and Arslan, not knowing that the boy in front of him is Arslan himself. Ichiol is a brain-dead religious zealot like the rest of Lusitania's, and he gets into a verbal spat with Arslan about how justified their holy war and ethnic cleansing is. Just then, Elam returns there, and on seeing Ichiol, he covers his face and draws a sword. However, Arslan stops them from fighting, and Ichiol decides to retreat because he owes him one for taking him hostage in the past. However, he gives him their version of the Bible and tells him to read about the faith of Yarda. Soon, Darien and Narcissus return to Arslan with their findings. They decide that their first task is to raise an army, and for that, Arslan and his party ride to the Kashan fortress, which has still not fallen to Lusitania. The Lusitania soldiers chase after them, but Farah and Give manage to hold them back by shooting them down. As soon as they reach the fortress, reinforcements arrive and shoot down the Lusitania soldiers from an advantageous position. Arslan and his party safely make it to the Kashan fortress, where they are greeted by Hoder, the lord of the fortress. Hoder is a man of many words, and he cannot stop speaking as he tells the prince how glad he is to see him alive and serve him. He presents him with a very luxurious meal and even tries to get him to marry his daughter. Arslan tries changing the topic and says that he wants to help the people who are suffering in the capital. He declares his intentions to change the rudimentary policies of their kingdom, starting with freeing all the slaves. He asks Hoder if he will support him in doing that because Kashan Fortress has the greatest number of slaves per capita in Pars. While Hoder laughs and says that it is a noble idea, Narcissus notices something odd about his reaction. Later, Arslan and his group are shown their bedrooms, and even though Darien insists that he will stay by the prince's side to protect him, Narcissus convinces him that there is no need for that. It turns out that was a ploy from Hoder to separate Arslan from his group, so that he could discuss something with him in private. Narcissus anticipated this, so he let Hoder get what he wanted, and he has gathered all the men in the room next to Arslan. Gyu senses someone sneaking into the room from the window, so he goes there to intercept him, only to find that it was Arslan who came here by jumping balconies. Darien is furious and worried at the same time, but then Arslan tells them that Hoder laid out two conditions to support him. The first is to make his daughter the future queen, and the second is that Arslan should refrain from extreme reforms like freeing the slaves. Arslan asked him to give him time until tomorrow to come up with an answer, and Narcissus thinks that it is good enough. He doesn't trust Hoder now and asks Arslan to be ready to evacuate at a moment's notice. He sends Give to relay this message to Farah, who had already sensed there was something going on in the castle. Narcissus also sends Elam on a mission. Soon after that, Hoder arrives at Arslan's door, leading a troop of armed soldiers. He tells him that Darien, Narcissus, and others at his side plan to harm him and asks his permission to eliminate them. Arslan refuses and says that he trusts his people with his life. He goes out of his room and tells everyone that they are leaving, and they come out of the room fully geared up. Hoder doesn't understand what is going on, but Arslan tells him that they will not stay here any longer. They get on their horses, and Hoder runs after Arslan to convince him to forgive him. He sends his men to lead his course, but Farah and Give knock down the men who were carrying hidden daggers. Darien jumps from his course and tells the soldiers surrounding them that it will be best for them to step down. Hoder commands his archers to shoot him, but their bowstrings snap because Elam had cut them on Narcissus' command earlier. Now that Hoder is at a disadvantage, Darien asks him to open the gate and let them go peacefully. However, Hoder knows that he will be branded a traitor after this, so he is ready to go to the extreme end. He commands his soldiers to attack, but they are no match for the might of the skilled party guarding Arslan. After defeating all the soldiers, Darien points his blade at Hoder, who rushes at Arslan instead. However, Narcissus kills him before he can do any harm, and the soldiers accept their defeat and let them out. Once outside the fortress, Arslan rushes to the slaves' quarter and tells them that they are all free. They ask if Hoder permitted it, and Arslan says that Hoder is dead. The slaves are furious at this, and they attack Arslan to avenge their master. However, Darien saves him in time and leads him away. As they rest at a safe distance, Narcissus tells Arslan that he knew this would happen. He says that despite all his flaws, Hoder must have been a generous master to the slaves, which is why they were loyal to him. He narrates the story of how he freed all his slaves after succeeding his father, but a few months later he found the slaves working in the capital instead, because living under a generous master was the easiest way for them to live. Narcissus tells Arslan not to be deterred by his words or by what he saw today, because there is not just one right answer to the problems of the world, He asks him to walk on the path of righteousness as he sees fit and bring peace to the world. After that, Darien asks where they should go now, and Arslan says that they should head to Peshawar, which has the largest fraction of the functional Persian army. On the other hand, Hilms goes to the injured general who has regained consciousness and reveals his identity to him. He tells him to rethink his loyalty and then leaves for his room. In his room, Hilms thinks about how he was on the way to becoming a great warrior, and his ailing dad told him that he would become the greatest king of Pars one day. However, that very night, his father was killed, and even though he survived, he was left with a Fire Lord Zuko-style burn that never stops reminding him of his past. Hilms is frustrated about it, and he thinks that now the only person he has to deal with is Arslan, and then he will be the sole contender to the throne. Just then, a maid comes there to inform him that he has a visitor. The visitor introduces himself as Xande, the son of Carlin, who has come here to serve Hilms after his father's death. He swears to kill Darien and Arslan to avenge his father, and Hilms just smirks as he gives him the chance to prove himself. Unaware of this, Arslan and his group ride out to Peshawar. At night, Farah senses some disturbances in the air and concludes that there are people out hunting them. Soon enough, a group of soldiers comes near them, and Darien volunteers to stay behind and deal with them, while Narcissus and others lead Arslan to safety. However, Narcissus and Farah split from the group midway, and only Arslan, Elam, and Jeev are left now. Elam assures Arslan that they will reunite with their friends at Peshawar, so they keep riding ahead. Meanwhile, Darien is defeating the enemy's soldiers, and Farah comes there to back him up. Seeing that they are outclassed, the soldiers begin retreating, but just then Xande arrives there and tells them all to stop being such cowards. He unsheathes his giant sword and declares that he will kill Darien. Farah shoots him, but he deflects the arrow and pushes her away before clashing with Darien. Darien finds that Xande has incredible strength because he can uproot entire trees when his blade gets stuck in them. He keeps his distance until Farah shoots Xande's horse and gives him the chance to finish him. However, Xande blocks his spear at the last moment and his soldiers come to back him up. Darien and Farah decide to retreat immediately after that. On the other hand, some soldiers attack Arslan's group too, and they somehow fend them off and escape. However, Elam's horse gets shot down and he falls to the ground. Arslan turns around to rescue him and fights off the enemy soldier attacking him. But then they find that the rest of the soldiers have surrounded him. Jeev has no choice but to throw his pouch of gold to distract the soldiers and buy them enough time to escape. On the other hand, Darien and Farah are still fighting Lusitanian soldiers, who are present at every step. Narcissus is not far away from them, and he is keeping an eye on the Zot clan that governs these parts. They are a bunch of grisly thugs who attack the Lusitania soldiers as soon as they see them and demand that they run away after leaving their money and weapons. However, their leader runs out of luck as he finds Hilms in front of him. Hilms cuts him in two with one slash of his sword, and the leader's daughter charges at him for vengeance. The other thugs also join her, and a bloody battle ensues between them and the Lusitania soldiers. However, with Hilms at their side, the soldiers manage to kill all the thugs. The girl is left alone, and she keeps attacking Hilms over and over again, even though it is clear that he vastly outclasses her in skill and strength. He's impressed by her agility, though, and remarks that if her people were as fast as her, they would still be alive. The girl angrily attacks him again, but he just slams her against the rocks. He declares that she will be punished now, and in response, she spits at his face. Before Hilms can punish her, Narcissus arrives to distract him. Hilms wants to finish the battle they left uncompleted in the capital, but the girl tells Narcissus to stay away because she wants to kill the masked bastard and avenge her dad. Narcissus tells her that she is not strong enough to do this, and then exchanges blows with Hilms. Hilms realizes that he is strong, and he has also heard of his genius strategies, so he invites Narcissus to serve him. Narcissus just mocks him, saying that he may be the greatest warrior here, but he lacks the character required to be his master. Enraged at this, Hilms attacks him, but then the rocks above them come rolling down just as Narcissus had engineered, crushing the Lusitania soldiers. When the dust settles, Narcissus has escaped with the Zot girl, Alfarid, who can only cry that she is too weak to avenge her father. He decides to take the girl to a safe place, and by talking to him throughout the way, she realizes that he is a really smart and dependable person. So she decides to tag along with him for life rather than returning to her clan. On the other hand, Xande pursues Darien and Farah and succeeds in cornering them again. As they clash again, a shadow leaps out of the ground and attacks Darien, but he dodges it just in time. It is the masked magician working for Hilms, and he tells Xande that he is here to back him up. Darien is confused about what is happening, and Farah tells him that the person is a user of dark magic, and it will be difficult to fight against him. Suddenly, Xande attacks them and throws Farah off of her horse, and she is left to fend against Lusitania's soldiers on all sides. Meanwhile, Xande fights Darien, telling him that he is serving the son of a usurper while he is serving the real king of Pars. Just then, the magician emerges from the ground, and as Darien dodges his attack, he is separated from his horse. Xande attacks him using this chance, and while Darien is blocking his attack, the magician appears behind him. However, Arslan comes to his rescue just then and attacks the magician, who vanishes and attacks him from the ground. Elam catches Arslan as he is thrown away from his ride, and at the same time, Darien overpowers Xande and frees himself. He finds the magician moving towards Arslan, so he rushes in the same direction, defeating the enemy soldiers in his way in an instant. He stabs the magician through the heart and Xande attacks him immediately. However, Darien manages to bring him down from his horse and points his spear at him. Xande throws his sword and runs away, but Farah shoots him down, and he falls off the cliff. Darien immediately goes to the prince to apologize for putting him in danger, but Arslan remarks that he saves him every time, so it felt good to return that favor to him this once. Soon, Arslan and his group reach near Peshawar, but Lusitania's soldiers are lying in ambush for them there too. Luckily, backup arrives in the form of General Kishwald, whom Narses had already contacted about the situation earlier. Kishwald attacks the Lusitania soldiers and forces them to run away. After exchanging pleasantries with Kishwald, Arslan notices the girl behind Narses and asks about her. Alfred gets down from the horse and introduces herself as Narses' wife, leaving everyone stunned. Anyway, they enter the Peshawar fortress, which is situated on the eastern border of the Pars kingdom. Darien and others keep teasing Narses about finding a wife while he was away from them, and he nervously explains that the girl is clinging to him after he saved her from Silver Mask. Just then, another general named Bahman stationed at Peshawar comes out to greet Arslan. The two generals swear their loyalty to the crown prince, but Bahman seems to be bothered by some thoughts. At night, Alfred visits Narses' room only to find Elam there. They butt heads because Elam doesn't want a woman to distract Narses while he is so busy, and Alfred gets mad and goes to rant out her frustration to Farah. Farah also advises her not to get in Narses' way because right now he is completely devoted to building a kingdom. The next day, a meeting is called with all the high-ranking officers of Peshawar, and they say that they cannot raise an army immediately. Bahman and Darien start arguing about this because the old general is against sending their troops anywhere before the year ends. Narses stops Darien and tries taunting Bahman about being old, but the general gets angry and leaves the room. Narses believes that this is all an act to avoid answering further questions. Later, Kishwald informs Darien and others that shortly before the recent war, Bahman received a letter from Varys, and ever since then, he has been a different man. No one knows the contents of the letter, but Darien believes that it is related to his uncle's request to swear loyalty to Arslan personally. Arslan is troubled by everything, so he goes to watch the sunset to cool his mind. Suddenly, he feels someone approaching him and finds that it is the silver-masked man everyone is talking about. He asks how he got into the fortress, and Hilms laughs, saying that he knows this place like the back of his hand. Arslan draws his sword to fight him, introducing himself as the crown prince of Pars. Hilms laughs, saying that he is just the son of a usurper, and for that reason he will suffer. He declares that you will not kill Arslan right now, but keep torturing him to vent the rage that he has contained for the past 16 years. Arslan attacks him, only to get hit back and disarmed, but as Hilms is about to attack him, he pulls out a torch and swings it at him in desperation. Hilms is afraid of fire, and he is frozen because of his phobia. Suddenly, Farah shoots him, but he somehow deflects her arrow. Just then, Narses, Darien, and others also arrive there, and they corner Hilms. As he tries to run away, Kishwald cuts off his escape and forces him back. Even though he is surrounded on all sides, Hilms dodges all the enemies and rushes to kill Arslan. However, General Bahman arrives there right in time and sacrifices himself to save Arslan. Hilms is horrified to see him die because Bahman was his swordsmanship instructor in the past. He asks him why he would sacrifice his life, and Bahman replies that it was Varys' request. He asks Hilms to retreat, and he does the same. Darien tries pursuing him, but the old general holds onto his robe and says that if they kill Hilms, the rightful bloodline of the Pars royal family will die out. Everyone is shocked to hear this, and Arslan is horrified because this means he is not the real son of Andra. The old general coughs blood and falls down, and he only apologizes to Arslan and asks him to become a great king before dying. Arslan and others don't even have time to process their grief when suddenly a soldier arrives with an urgent message. A 50,000-strong army of the Sindo Kingdom has breached the border under cover of darkness, and they are heading directly towards them. An emergency war meeting is called, but Arslan is still out of it as the dying words of Bahman echo in his mind. He somehow pulls himself together and declares that they will repel the external enemies first before reclaiming the capital. Soon the preparation for the battle is done, and Arslan suggests that he too come and fight alongside the soldiers. However, Narses and Darien assure him that they are already overpowered, so he should just sit back and relax. They lead an army of just 10,000 cavalrymen, and Narses assures Darien that despite the smaller number, they will win because their enemy is ignoring timing, terrain, and his troops' morale all at once. Meanwhile, Raj, the second prince of Sindhu, is personally leading the army to get the lead on his elder brother so that he can get ahead in the contention to become the next king. He doesn't stop even though it is getting dark and his soldiers are tired because of the cold and the unfamiliar terrain. He says that they should continue to push forward when, suddenly, a rain of arrows falls upon them. The prince leads his army ahead despite that and clashes head-on with Kishwald and his forces. Soon, Darien leads another battalion to attack the Sindhu army from the side, but Prince Raj commands them well and manages to stay in formation while pushing them back. However, Narses has a plan to deal with that too. Suddenly, the Sindhu army is attacked from behind. They turn around wondering if Persian soldiers have snuck behind them, but to their surprise, they find the flag of the first prince and his troops on top of the cliff from where the arrows are raining. The soldiers panic and report the matter to Raj, who believes that his brother is trying to sabotage his plans and kill him. To finish things off, Narses has planted Alfarid and Elam among the Sindhu army, and they yell contradictory orders to confuse them. The army is sent into chaos as they retreat, but they take the only open course where a huge natural trap is waiting for them. The Sindhu army runs over a frozen lake that cracks under their weight, and the prince somehow escapes falling into the water. Just then, Darien and Narses come there to attack him. They plan to take him hostage, so they attack him from both sides, but he manages to stall them and they escape using a clever ploy. However, Alfarid shoots down his horse and manages to take him prisoner by herself. Soon after that, Raj is brought as a prisoner in front of Arslan, and he is rather chill about whatever his fate may be now. However, Arslan just tells him that he wanted to talk to him, which is why he invited him here. Darien slashes his ropes, and then Arslan hosts a dinner for the foreign prince while they talk about important matters. However, that gets delayed as Raj, Farah, and Jeev get into a drinking competition, where Farah absolutely demolishes the two of them. After that, Arslan finally gets to talk with Raj, and he asks him to become his ally. Arslan says that they will help him become the king of Sindhu in exchange for his help in the war. On the other side, on receiving no signal, the lord of the fortress grows impatient and attacks the provisions, but to his surprise, there are archers hidden inside the boxes. They immediately counterattack and push the soldiers of the fortress back, and then Darien and others join the fray, forcing the soldiers to retreat. The lord of the castle decides to kill Arslan even after all his men have run away, but Darien brings him down with his spear. The next day, Arslan's forces have conquered the fortress of Gujarat, and Jaz has been arrested. Arslan asks him if he always intended to betray him, and Jaz scoffs at him, saying that he was not serving him. He declares that he only serves the prime minister because he raised him like he was his own son when he didn't even know who his parents were. Arslan is moved by his story, so he lets Jaz go, and Narses believes that letting the spy go was the best decision in this case. Soon after that, Elam runs to Arslan's court to inform everyone that Prince Gad has started marching towards them with an army of over 150,000 soldiers and hundreds of war elephants. As for Raj, he seems to have encircled Gad's army, and Narses believes that this situation will be tricky for them to handle. He explains the possible strategy Gad will take, and it will be to divide his enormous army into two parts to deal with both Raj and Persian forces together. His fears come true, and Gad sends just enough of his soldiers to surround the fortress, while he leads the majority of his army to face Raj. A brutal war begins between the two half-brothers, and since Raj has the terrain advantage, Gad decides to nullify it by sending his greatest weapon, the drug war elephants. In their frenzy, the elephants squash Raj's soldiers under their feet, and they are undeterred even as a barrage of arrows is shot at them. Raj is already at a disadvantage, and then he gets the terrible news that the Persian forces can't come to help him because they are being held back at the fortress by Gad's forces. His army is utterly defeated by the war elephants, and just as Raj is about to surrender to prevent the deaths of any more men, the Persian forces led by Arslan arrive there. Darien leads the charge to assault Gad's cavalry, and Farah and others also take part in the battle. Raj approaches Arslan and asks how he can be here because he just heard that his army was trapped in the fortress. Narses explains that they just left dummies wearing their uniforms on the fortress walls to confuse the enemy forces and escaped using the back door in the meantime. Raj is impressed by Narses' strategies, and up next is Darien's chance to show off his skills. As Gad launches the war elephants after him, Darien leads them towards a trap, where the soldiers under Elam's command shoot poison-tipped spears at the elephants. Most of the elephants die because of the attack, and then Darien charges directly at Gad. He jumps atop his elephant and disarms him, but Jazz intervenes just then. He jumps on top of the elephant with his horse, engages with Darien, and then takes the prince away safely. Farah prepares to shoot him, but Arslan stops her. Gad and his army flee after the annihilation of the war elephants, marking victory for Arslan and Raj. In the royal palace of Sindhu, Gad berates Jazz for taking him and fleeing from the battle, saying that if he had stayed behind, they would have still won. He curses Jazz and the prime minister as well, and the prime minister finally realizes that he chose to serve the wrong prince. However, the sick king of Sindhu suddenly regains consciousness, bringing an unforeseen twist to the story. Gad immediately goes to him to snitch about Raj attacking the capital to take the throne by force. He asks his dad to name him the crown prince to end this conflict, but the old king knows that neither of his two sons can be fully trusted. That is why he declares that his successor will be chosen by a duel before the gods. When this news reaches Raj, he immediately heads to Arslan. He says that they can name a representative to fight on their behalf in the duel, and he is here to request that Arslan send Darien to fight on his behalf. Arslan is taken aback by the sudden request, but he has faith that Darien will not lose to anyone, so he decides to send him as Raj's representative. When Gad receives this news, he is furious that his half-brother chose a Parsian to fight the duel that will decide the fate of Sindhu. So he decides to unleash Bahadur, the most devious of the prisoners, locked in the dungeons of the palace, and make him his representative. The next day, Arslan and his group ride through the capital city of Sindhu, braving the sharp gazes of the people. They come to the arena where the duel will be fought, and Raj introduces Arslan to his dad before taking his seat by his side. The hollowed-out area around the arena is set on fire, and the war drums blare as Darien makes his entrance. From the other side, Bahadur comes out too, tossing aside the soldiers who hold him back using thick chains. He roars loud enough to rattle the entire arena, and then snaps his cuffs using brute strength. The two warriors walk into the arena, and the bridges are lifted. On the king's signal, the duel begins, and Bahadur charges at Darien, managing to send his shield flying with a couple of hits. Darien dodges the brute's attacks and then deals a slash to his chest, but Bahadur just laughs because the wound is quite shallow. He keeps Darien on the defensive, and suddenly, his relentless attacks break Darien's sword into two, and he almost loses his head with the next attack. Darien managed to save himself from the attack, but he is at a clear disadvantage now. It takes all his effort to dodge the brute's attacks, and when he sees a chance, he stabs him with his broken sword. However, Bahadur simply kicks him away, and Darien barely avoids falling into the fiery pit below. The giant brute keeps pushing Darien back, but just as he brings him to the edge of the arena, Darien sets his cloak on fire and throws it at his face. The brute panics because of the fire and drops his weapon, and by the time he gets free from the fire to attack Darien again, he has lost his momentum. Darien simply catches one of his wildly swinging fists and then draws out a dagger he was hiding all this time and stabs the brute in the throat, killing him instantly. The old king declares Darien as the victor and Raj as his heir, but Gad is not willing to accept the outcome of the duel. He points his sword at his father and tells him to hand over the throne to him right now. Raj steps up to protect his father, and both the princes call out their guards, and a battle breaks out. Narcissus decides that they should not get involved, so he leads his group out, but Gad's soldiers attack them there. Narcissus and others hold them back while Farah leads Arslan ahead. However, she gets distracted fighting other soldiers, and one man rushes towards the unguarded Arslan. Luckily, Jazz comes there right at the moment and strikes down the man before leading the prince to safety. On the other hand, Gad is growing impatient as his guards fail to capture Raj or the king. The prime minister has had enough, and he tells Gad to accept defeat now. However, the furious Gad accuses him of betraying him and joining Raj's side, and he slashes him down. This scene leaves everyone aghast, and both sides stop fighting immediately. Just then, Darien roars, asking everyone to put their weapons down. He reminds them that this was a duel in front of the gods, and they have to accept it as a divine mandate. He challenges anyone not content with the decision to fight in one-on-one, and all the soldiers suddenly begin chanting his name instead. Gad is at a loss now. His soldiers do not follow his commands, and Raj orders his men to arrest him and take him away. Just then, Jas comes there, running to see his adoptive father. The prime minister tells him that this is a fitting end for a person who chose to serve the wrong master, and asks him not to make the same mistakes. He dies with that, and Jas cannot stop weeping over his body. Soon after that, the old king dies too, and people come from far-off cities to mourn him. Raj weeps at his funeral, but Narcissus can tell that it is nothing more than an extremely good acting performance. Later, Arslan frees Jas, who is being held in the underground prisons, and asks him to work for him now that he has no master. Before Jas can give an answer, Raj comes to Arslan and invites him to a banquet being held later at night. It turns out that the banquet is actually for Gad. In Sindhu, when a member of royalty is to be executed, he is treated to his last feast before that. Gad is sweating buckets as he nervously drinks, and when Raj comes to check up on him, he falls to his feet and begs for forgiveness. Raj refuses to forgive him and mocks the pitiful state he has been reduced to. Just then, Arslan and his group arrive there, and Gad believes that he is the reason for his misfortunes. He decides to at least kill Arslan before he dies and attacks him with a shard of a plate. However, Kichwold's eagle arrives there just in time and digs out one of Gad's eyes, forcing him to his knees. Upon seeing this unsightly display, Raj decides to hasten his half-brother's execution, and he is beheaded on the spot. The next day, Raj visits Arslan and asks if he is about to depart for Peshawar the next day. On getting the confirmation, the new king of Sindhu decides to send 3,000 cavalrymen along with Arslan as a thanks. Arslan says that he just needs about 500, but Raj insists and makes him accept his initial offer. The ministers are not happy about that, but Raj says that he is sending the 3,000 soldiers to tear apart the Parjan soldiers from within. The ministers are shocked that he would betray someone who helped him so much, and Raj replies that it will help Arslan with his character development. However, Jas hears all of this. The next day, Arslan and his army depart Sindhu along with the 3,000 cavalrymen given by Raj, but Jas does not join them. At night, the Sindhu soldiers sneak out of their tents to attack the Parjan forces by surprise, and Raj is also nearby to see this. As he sees numerous fires from their campsite, he believes that his forces did their job well. He goes ahead to capture Arslan, but to his surprise, he finds that his soldiers have been apprehended and he has walked into a trap. Darian suddenly attacks his army, and on his cue, other Parjan soldiers also join the action. Raj tries running away, but his way is blocked by Geev and Farah. He drops his weapon, but just as Arslan comes, he throws a hidden blade at him, which is parried by Jas. Raj understands what happened here, and Narcissus confirms that after hearing his nasty plan, Jas warned them about it, so they took precautions. Raj is tied up and brought in front of Arslan and Narcissus. They reveal that they plan to capture him and take him with them to Paris for 2 years. Raj thinks that time will be over soon, but Narcissus explains that they will also inform the enemy countries of Sindhu that their king has been taken prisoner. Raj realizes that his kingdom will fall within 2 years at this rate, so he concedes to Arslan's demand and signs a non-aggression treaty for 3 years. He leaves with that, and then Jas officially pledges his loyalty to Arslan, and they return to Peshawar. Meanwhile, in the royal capital of Pars, Gis and Hilms have somehow managed to send the bloodthirsty archpriest and his temple knights away, but now they are occupying a fortress that bars them from communicating with the Lusitania mainland. Gis asks Hilms to lead an army to retake the fortress and kill Bodin, who is getting too bold and demanding lately. Hilms is doubtful about what to do because he knows that Gis wants him and Bodin to fight to death and destroy each other. However, the General Sam, who has switched sides now, advises him that this is their chance to rally up an army of Parjans. Defeating Bodin will be vital to restoring Pars, and if they can do it now, it will gain the support of the people as well. Impressed by his advice, Hilms accepts the task given to him by Gis. He asks for funds and the freedom to raise an army among the Parjans, and Gis readily gives them to him. Within a couple of weeks, Hilms gathers an army of 30,000 Parjan men. On the way, they hear about a one-eyed man who is keeping the temple knights from hurting the innocent travelers, and Sam immediately knows who they are talking about. He finds the man in a cave, and it turns out that he is Kubert, a former general of the Pars army who quit along with his soldiers after hearing that Andra had deserted his soldiers. He is living freely now, enjoying wine, women, and hunting Lusitania soldiers. Sam gets him on their side, and they reach the target fortress, which sits on top of a pillar-like mountain. Since there is no way to infiltrate it, Hilms decides to taunt the Lusitania soldiers into coming out by burning the flag of Yarda in front of the fortress, and the enraged Bodin sends his troops to massacre him. The Lusitania soldiers rush ahead blindly, and the generals under Hilms follow the strategy of attacking and retreating. The Lusitania soldiers keep following them, and they are flanked by Hilms and Kubert from both sides. The war rages till late in the evening, and after suffering a defeat, the Lusitania soldiers retreat to their fortress and shut the gates. Meanwhile, Hilms and his men regroup to discuss their plan, and Kubert finally gets to see the son of the former king. He directly asks Hilms what drives him to become king, and he replies that he wants to regain his rights and bring peace to Pars. Kubert is about to mention that he was the one who brought Lusitania into Pars, but Zande, who survived the fall earlier and rejoined the troops, gets angry. Kubert comes to a conclusion and says that he cannot serve Hilms, so he will be taking his leave. Hilms permits it and asks Sam to reward him as he goes ahead. Back at Peshawar, Arslan signs 2 very important policies that will change the future of Pars forever. The first of them is the pledge to destroy Lusitania, for which he calls on all Parsians to rally at Peshawar under his leadership. The second one is the promise to abolish slavery after he becomes king. Soon after that, numerous lords from all over Pars arrive at Peshawar to pledge their loyalty to Arslan in order to destroy Lusitania. However, there are some troubles they bring along too, as more soldiers assemble at Peshawar than the fortress can handle. One of the young and overzealous nobles approaches Arslan's room at night and gets into a fight with Jas, who is acting as the prince's guard now. The soldier hurls some racist slurs at Jas, who gets angry. The two men are about to fight, but Kishwald arrives there right on time and forces them to stop. The news reaches Arslan's ears soon, and he runs to the room where Darien and Narses are to inquire about it. Narses explains that many people believe that the people in Arslan's inner circles are not trustworthy enough because they don't have the required pedigree. To solve this problem, the strategist suggests that Arslan temporarily demote him. He believes that as long as he has the right to command the military, it will be fine if they give his position as the chief advisor to Lord Lucian, who is respected by everyone. Arslan is shaken by this advice, but Narses tells him that it is his burden as their leader. Soon, they call a military meeting with Lucian and Kishwald alongside the inner circle. Narses explains to Lucian about Hilms, who is the son of the former king. He declares that even though Hilms has right over the throne, he sided with Lusitania and harmed the people of Pars, so he should not be allowed to become king. Lucian understands this and decides to support Arslan in his battle against Lusitania and Hilms. However, Arslan seems quite down. He recites the rumor that he once heard about Andra killing his brother to ascend to the throne, and that is why he cannot blame his cousin for seeking revenge. Narses says that they have no way to prove if the rumor is true and says that they must still strive to punish the man who brought destruction to their country. He asks Arslan if he has the resolution to become king, and he hesitates before saying that he wants to focus on freeing Pars first and he will deal with Hilms after that. On the other hand, Hilms and his men have successfully infiltrated the fortress. Baden has already abandoned the fortress and escaped, and Hilms kills all the knights who refuse to surrender. Meanwhile, Entiol is also on a mission to scout Peshawar because he wants to distinguish himself tonight. He disguises himself as a girl and enters the fortress, serving liquor to the merrymaking soldiers. He then hears that many people are shocked about Arslan's policy of freeing slaves. Isiol is confused by this and frustrated by the Pars soldiers who act like they have already won the war. He goes to vent out his frustration, but the drunk soldier from before comes there to hit on him again. Isiol angrily slams him to the ground, knocking him out, and Arslan sees it all while passing. He checks on the soldier, who is just unconcerned, and helps Isiol sneak out of the fortress, not realizing his true identity. They talk on the bridge to the gate, and Arslan reveals that long ago he met a slave Lusitania boy who opened his eyes to the fact that there was a world outside Pars that he knew nothing about. During his travels, he saw the good and bad parts of Pars, and now he wants to contribute to the war and make things better. Etiol tells him that making the country better is the king's job, but it doesn't matter what your lineage is if you want to change the world. His words give Arslan the answer he had been looking for. And then he escorts Isiol outside the fortress and hides him in a cart so that he can escape later. Once he returns to the fortress, Arslan meets up with his trusted friends and informs them that he has no intention of giving up his right to the throne to Hilms anymore. He declares that even though his cousin may be more suited to ascend the throne according to bloodline, he wants to make Pars a better country as its king. Everyone kneels before him and swears to support him in his quest. Soon the preparations for their march to the capital begin, and Narses and Darien find the fat nobleman picking a fight with Jas again because he is not happy about being posted at the rear of the army. Jas tells him to talk to Narses about it, but the noble is too angry. However, Give breaks the tension by singing a song and gives Narses enough time to intervene and calm the situation. However, the noble curses Give before leaving, saying that the prince has too many untrustworthy characters around him. At night, Give gets into a fight with the adopted younger brother of General Shaper, whom he had relieved of his misery. Give not only taunts him, but also the fat noble from before. Just then, Farah throws a dagger near them and tells them to stop fight in front of Arslan. Arslan and Darien arrive there, and Darien punches Give for taunting the nobles. Give talks back to him, and as a result, Arslan banishes him immediately. Give accepts this, saying that he never planned to serve at his court anyway. However, this was all an act orchestrated by Narses, and Give was in on it. They wanted Arslan to banish him to dispel the concerns of the lords, and even after being banished for namesake, the musician has gone on a mission to find a certain person. Meanwhile, Narses explains their strategy to all the lords and the generals. He states that they need to take the fort of St. Emmanuel, which falls in Lusitania territory, and use it as a base to take back their capital. The terrain is difficult, but the lord of the fort is not well versed in combat, and Narses plans to exploit that weakness. There is another fortress along the way, and the young nobles volunteer to take it for them, but Narcissus says that they do not plan to fight there. So that they don't get dissatisfied, Arslan tells the nobles that he would hate to lose precious men in a battle that doesn't need to be fought and asks them to step down. However, the next day, the three young lords get too carried away and march ahead of the main troops. They find some Lusitania soldiers waiting for them, and they charge at them without confirming the situation. They fall into their trap and are completely cut off from the main army. Arslan learns about it in the evening, and he immediately orders the army to halt and organizes a search party. Narcissus had already sent Elam and Alfred on the mission, but they returned empty-handed because the terrain was too steep and there was no moon in the sky. As everyone is dejected, Arslan hears the sound of a lute being played nearby and realizes that Jeev found the separated soldiers. Meanwhile, the three nobles and their soldiers have been surrounded on all sides by their enemies. They are ready to lay down their lives to ensure that Arslan is not held back, but then suddenly, the Persian army arrives there. Together with them, the nobles manage to defeat the Lusitania soldiers, and afterwards, they kneel before Arslan to apologize. They ask him why he did not abandon them and go ahead, and Arslan replies that even though sacrifices will be necessary in the battle, he wants as many people to survive as they can. On the other side, Giv is about to take his leave when Farah finds him. She doesn't try to stop him but relays Arslan's message to him, apologizing to him for making him the villain in their act. In response, Giv just sings her a song and asks her to sing it to herself whenever she misses him, and with that, he takes his leave. Back in the capital, Giz hears that Arslan is leading an army of about 50,000 soldiers, but his subordinates believe that the number might be made up. They think that Arslan is leading only 30,000 soldiers here, but Giz orders them to rally an army of 100,000 soldiers to thoroughly crush them. The soldiers think that's overkill, but just then, Hilms also arrives there and agrees with Giz. He asks him to lend him 70,000 troops, and along with the 30,000 men under him, they will demolish Arslan. Giz agrees but warns Hilms that he is only loaning him the soldiers and he wants them back after the war. Hilms visits Andra after that to tell him that he is going to fight against his son next. Andra just laughs at him, telling him to stop believing that he has won. He says that what he did was only according to the prophecy, and he is also doing the same without realizing it. Hilms is furious at him, but he decides to let him live a bit longer. In the meantime, Elam and Alfred infiltrate a pub and find out that the enemy is coming at them with an army of 100,000 soldiers. They also learn that a general named Sam is working under Hilms now and relay this news to Arslan, who wonders how such a loyal man can switch sides. Anyway, they begin preparing for the war. Arslan trains with Darian, but he gets easily disarmed. However, seeing how curiously the soldiers were watching them, he gets an idea. He sets up the expert weapon users of his army to teach the newbies how to use the weapons better. On the other hand, Count Barca, the Lord of Fort Emmanuel, turns out to be the father figure of Ishol. He lets in the army under Hilms to enter the fort, and Ishol is not happy about letting the Persian heathens inside. However, Barca tells him that it is the king's order, and they plan to crush Arslan's forces in the upcoming battle with all their might. The very next day, Arslan and his forces also reach Fort Emmanuel. Soon the war begins, and the Persian foot soldiers charge at the fortress, and the Lusitania soldiers try to keep them at bay. The commanders of the Persian army grow apprehensive when they spot Sam in the enemy ranks, and that reduces their morale by a bit. However, the battle continues, and after a few hours, the gates of the fortress open as Zande leads the cavalry to attack the tired Persian soldiers. The foot soldiers retreat upon seeing him, but they can't get too far without being crushed. Darian watches this from a distance and takes it as his cue to join the battle. He leads the cavalry ahead, and together with the help of the young lords and Jas, they begin cutting down the enemy cavalry. At the same time, Kishwald enters the sewers with a small group of soldiers to open the gates from within, but he finds Sam defending the path. They engage in a battle of both swords and ideals as Kishwald berates Sam for serving a man who brought enemies to their capital just to fulfill his revenge. In the midst of this chaos, no one has yet noticed that General Kubert has also joined the action. He may not favor any of the princes, but he hates the Lusitanians, and that is reason enough for him to wreak havoc on the battlefield alone. Meanwhile, Etiol is also fighting on the front lines like a religious fanatic. He has his first taste of killing an enemy that leaves him shaken, and soon a bunch of Persian soldiers mob him, and he falls from his horse. He suddenly notices Elam on the cliff and recalls him from the capital, so he follows him. On the other hand, Zande heads straight towards Arslan's tent to attack him, but after demolishing the tent, he finds that it was a decoy. His soldiers are trapped with only one entrance and exit, and the Persian troops shower them with arrows and catapults. Zande runs away, only to find Darian waiting for him all alone. They resume the battle they left incomplete the last time, and Darian manages to pierce Zande's heart. However, the magician appears out of the shadows to shoot Darian, who deflects his arrow right in time. The magician vanishes immediately after that, taking Xandit along with him. On the other hand, Itiel follows Elam and arrives at the true main camp of the Parjan forces along with some soldiers. He barges into Arslan's tent to search for the crown prince and is shocked to see Arslan there. He can't understand anything, so Arslan walks up to him and introduces himself as the crown prince of Pars. Itiel is furious and accuses Arslan of fooling him all this time. He tries stabbing him, but Elam comes in and manages to save the prince. Just then, Darian and others arrive there, killing Itiel's companions and cornering him. Arslan tells him to surrender, but Itiel throws a lamp to start a fire and escapes using the chaos. Alfred gets ready to follow him, and Narcissus advises her to keep a keen eye on the boy because he must have come here using some secret passage. Back at the base camp, Arslan thanks Elam and gets him treated. At night, Darian returns to the camp, and Arslan tells him that he's going to join the battle personally now. He declares that since their forces are matched equally up to this point, it is his duty as the leader to fight with his men and increase their morale. By the next morning, Alfred has also found a way to sneak into the fortress, and she sends a message to Narcissus, telling him that she will soon open the gates. Arslan walks to the front of his troops to give them a pep talk and then commands them to charge ahead. The battle begins again, but this time, Alfred and her troops are already inside the fort. They attack the Lusitania soldiers stationed on the wall and open the gates, allowing their main force to storm in with Darian at the lead. Darian and Kishwald charge ahead at the enemy cavalry, and the rest of the warriors fight other soldiers. Suddenly, some Lusitanian soldiers charge at Arslan from behind. Luckily, Kubert comes there just then, and he doesn't let the Lusitania soldiers reach the prince. Arslan is shocked to see him, and Kubert tells him to go ahead and prove that he is worthy of becoming a king. He begins steamrolling the enemies in the back, and using this chance, Arslan and others rush ahead into the main fort. They find that Sam has barricaded the entrance with spears, so they ditch their horses and begin engaging the enemy on foot. Arslan and Darian head ahead while Narcissus deals with Sam, but inside the fort they are welcomed by Lusitanian archers, who are constantly firing at them. Farah walks into the rain of arrows unfazed, declaring that by the grace of her god, the arrows of these cruel men will not touch her. Her words prove true, and no arrow is able to hit her while she easily shoots down the enemies. Using this chance, Arslan and Darian rush ahead and reach the room where Hilms is waiting for them, along with Count Barca. Darian is ready to engage him in combat instantly, but Arslan wants to talk things out with his cousin first. Hilms removes his mask as he says that there is nothing to talk about and declares that after killing him, he will take the throne of Pars. Arslan tries convincing him that they have the same enemy, but Hilms is firm on killing him, so Darian decides to fight him. They clash swords and fall out of the window, hanging on to sturdy vines to reach the ground. Both of them are almost equal in skill and strength, so their fight is a fierce one, with no one gaining the upper hand for more than a few seconds. With their powerful and elegant swordplay, they try to push their opponent down, but the balance of the fight does not tip in anyone's favor long enough. At the end, they decide to finish it with the next move and charge at each other at full speed. They hit each other, sustaining some severe damage, but Darian is the one to fall to the ground. However, Hilms refuses to kill him because he wants to make him give up before he dies. He summons the Dark Magicians, who work him from the shadows, and they take him away to safety because he is too injured to fight anymore. In the meantime, the battle has been won by the Parjan army, and the Lusitania soldiers are held captive. Kishwald orders his soldiers to not harm anyone and not plunder from any house because they are from a civilized country. However, the devout women of the fort suddenly start jumping to death one by one from a tall tower. Arslan freaks out on seeing this and asks Count Barca to stop them from dying meaninglessly because they will not be harmed. However, the old lord only thanks Arslan for his kindness. He draws out a dagger, saying that this is the path of the faith of Yarda, and they would rather take their lives than live as prisoners to heathens. Arslan tries to stop the old man, but it is useless, and he stabs himself and falls over the railing. Ichivol arrives there at the last moment and sees Arslan holding the bloody dagger as Count Barca, the man who raised him, falls to his death. He believes that this is all Arslan's doing, so he angrily attacks him. Arslan tries to fend off his attacks while explaining that it is a misunderstanding. He pushes Ishol away and his helmet falls off his head to reveal his long, flowy hair. Arslan is stunned to learn that the girl he saw in Peshawar that day was Ishol. He tries to tell him or her that the Count killed himself, but Ishol doesn't believe him and keeps attacking him. He manages to push Arslan to the ground and is about to finish him when Farah's arrow blocks his way. Farah and other soldiers arrive there to rescue Arslan, and they quickly restrain Ishol, who can only curse at them. After that, Arslan rushes to the garden and finds the injured Darian there. Darian apologizes for failing to finish Helmus, but Arslan tells him that it is fine because they won the battle. Outside, the Parjan soldiers keep an eye on the residents of the fort who have surrendered and treat the injured from both sides. Darian receives treatment from Jas, and Kishwald comes to check on him too. He is surprised to hear that there is a person who could defeat the greatest warrior of Pars, and Darian says that the only reason Helms left him alive is because he is not satisfied with a small victory. Later, Arslan goes to visit Etiol, who is being held in prison. It turns out she was a girl all along, only pretending to be a boy to become a knight. She heard from Barca's attendants that he took his own life, so she is not hostile towards Arslan now. Arslan offers her some food, asking her to think that she is depleting the enemy's rations by doing this. As she eats, Arslan asks her to tell her story. Etiol says that she was adopted into a knight family without an heir, so she decided to become a boy to become their heir. They hit it off well, but then Arslan brings the discussion to war and religion, fouling Etiol's mood because she can't hear anything bad about her religion. Anyway, Arslan tasks her to offer prayers to the dead Lusitania soldiers and unlocks her prison cell before going. The next day, Farah offers a prayer to the dead Parjan soldiers, and Etiol is called to do the same for the Lusitania soldiers. Soon after that, the Parjan army burns down the fort because they cannot leave any soldiers here, and they cannot risk the fort falling into enemy hands as well. They take the injured Lusitania soldiers along too, and Etiol tries to provide medical aid, but she is terrible at it, so Elam decides to teach her the correct way. Etiol soon devotes herself to caring for the sick and injured among the Lusitania, occasionally receiving valuable lessons from Farah and others. Meanwhile, the Parjan army, led by the confident Arslan, keeps marching towards their capital to take it back from their enemies.